Should you buy a home or rent? Both have advantages and disadvantages that often are very particular to your situation. So stick around for the next few minutes and let's discuss that a little bit more in depth. Hey everybody, I'm here with my friend Stephen Brock from the mortgage firm. And today we wanted to talk to you guys about the question whether you should buy or rent your home. So Stephen here is a friend of mine that we met through our veteran group since we both served in the United States Army.
Yes.
Yeah, Stephen, you were
Infantry.
what again? You were infantry, right? And I was field artillery, so
We don't like each other.
yeah, we're not the best of friends because obviously one of us wins battles and the other, yeah,
Fights the war.
yeah, right. So we wanted to share a little bit of our expertise and knowledge from our areas. As many of you know, I'm a financial planner. I'm the president and lead advisor at Vanir Wealth Strategies, and Stephen is one of my go-to mortgage originators for helping either some of my friends or even my clients if they're looking to either do a refinance or buy their first home. Stephen's one of the people that I enjoy sending people to because he knows what he's talking about when it comes to home mortgages. So,
Correct.
yeah, a little bit.
A little bit.
Just a little. As much as you can trust an infantry guy
There
to
you
get the
go.
mortgage stuff
Yeah.
right? Numbers don't come naturally, but you're one of the weird ones that get it.
Yes. That's all you need.
Right. So traditionally, homeownership has been seen as kind of the bedrock of the American dream and the best way to build long-lasting generational wealth for American families. But as we know, the world's kind of changed a little bit, right?
Yes.
So the question, it really begs the question, is that still the case in 2021? Is it more advantageous for you to buy or to rent your home? So I wanted to ask kind of Stephen, what are some of the advantages that you see all the time working with your clients for home ownership versus renting?
Well, home ownership, you automatically are going to have the equity in the home. So as the value of the home increases year over year, you're building equity with your own money, with having your own mortgage, your own home. Renting, you're building somebody else's equity because they will own that home. So therefore, your disadvantage on that side is the money you're putting into the home as renting, you're not gaining it back. So that's one of the major advantages is being able to get your money back out of your home and gaining that equity and having a lot of people keep that nest egg and eventually they sell it, take that money elsewhere, or they refi and pull that money out to do home improvements, vacations, investments, just depending on their avenue of approach.
Yeah, especially in an upward trending housing market, right?
Correct. With the housing market kind of skyrocketing as towards the end of 2021, we're seeing a lot of people who have bought a home already beginning of the year are starting to pull money out this year already,
Right.
within 8-9 months of it.
Yeah, I know around here, since we both live in Palm Beach County, Florida, the housing market has just been nuts. And you've seen it, I'm
Yes.
sure, in your business, the insane growth, people refining with pretty crazy low rates, historically especially.
Yes, we have historically low rates, so you're getting more bang for your buck. If the rates went up, your buying power is less. So with the historically low rates, your buying power is a lot more right now. And just a quick example, even on my personal side of things, is I refinanced my house last year, so 2020, and it appraised at 405. 6 months later, sold at 485. So that was a huge gap of equity that we just, in 6 months, pulled out of our house.
Yeah, that's a huge advantage. I mean,
Correct. Yes.
of course, it's a little bit, it requires for the housing market to do well for stuff like that.
And historically, the housing market has always gone up. Yes, we had the crash in 08, but it recovered pretty quickly outside of that. It has historically just kept creeping up every year. So your equity just kind of slowly keeps building and building and building. Your mortgage payment staying the same. So your gap in between is just going to be bigger and bigger.
I think you bring up a really good point there that you kind of highlight is kind of the short-term versus the long-term thinking, right? Because I see that a lot in my business, when it comes to investing for my clients. Sometimes, especially for younger folks, younger millennials and especially Generation Z, the people coming out of college now, kind of in their mid, even getting up into some later 20s, is the difference between investing and trading, right? And typically trading is short-term, right? You're looking to try to make a ton of money at once, which is great in an upward trending housing market. But I think what you're saying is like in investment-wise, there's always going to be hiccups in the stock market or the housing market or really any financial market.
Correct. And the great thing about buying a house, and even if you start buying investment properties or you take your first home and you switch it over to an investment property, is that it depends on your goal. If you have a short-term goal, like, hey, I need a cash flow from a rental property, we can look at that and you find the perfect house for that. Or if you're like, I want to build equity and my goal is a long-term goal, how much can I get out of this? Or if I pay, the other sides, if I pay more onto my mortgage to keep my principal to lower quicker, what is my savings over the course of the house? Do I pay it off a 30-year loan in 20 years? Do I keep my payment the same because I want the cash flow to come in? It just depends on your personal opinion on what you want to do throughout the history.
The history, yeah. That's a good point, though, is it depends, right?
Depends.
Because everybody's different. That's what I see when I'm building financial plans and investment portfolio plans for clients is literally every single person has a different situation. They have different goals.
Correct.
They're looking for. So I think that's a good segue into kind of some of the disadvantages maybe of home ownership versus renting.
So the disadvantage of home ownership is something breaks, you're the homeowner. You're the one responsible for it. There's not an 800 number you're calling to say, hey, come fix this right now. They take care of it. So that's the advantage of renting.
Right.
Renting, if something happens, you call the rental management company, the owner, and tell them, like, this is broken, this needs to be fixed, and they're on it. You don't worry about it from there on. As a homeowner, it's your responsibility to have it fixed. Of course, you have homeowners insurance, so anything major is going through homeowners insurance, so you have that protection, but all your minor little things is on you as a homeowner. So that is one of your disadvantages with it. It is a very small disadvantage if you look at it in the hindsight of the big scheme of everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I think also it depends on your values, I think. I mean, I know especially a lot of younger folks, there's differences between the generations, right? And what I see with a lot of folks that I work with is they really enjoy the flexibility of not being locked in somewhere, because some like to travel, some like to have new experiences. And I think that is kind of a disadvantage, obviously, of buying a home is it creates kind of a force to keep you in one place. And I know some people, especially younger folks, they don't like that. There's a bit of a trend going that way. But that, it goes back to what I said before. It kind of depends, right? It depends on what each person's value system are. What are they trying to get out of life? Do they want to kind of have a nest egg that they're trying to grow? They want to have investment properties. I know there's a lot of people that like to invest.
And as you're saying, people like to move around. It is on the average person either refinances or moves from their house every 3 to 5 years. So that statistic, if you take that into plan, like, okay, if you're on the lesser side of 3 years, even if you're at 2 on there, just because you decide to move somewhere else doesn't mean you need to sell the property. You could rent it out and now that's an investment property. So that nest egg and equity it's building, somebody else is actually paying for that for you.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because when I was in the Army, at one point I was stationed out of Fort Lewis in Washington State on Puget Sound there. And we bought a house out there originally, and I think we paid $300,000 for it, like brand new, got it exactly the way we wanted. And this was in 2013, I think, 2014. We bought it for $300,000, and we just looked at it the other day, and it's $560,000. And we were just kicking ourselves in the butt for maybe not just keeping it and renting it. Of course, the reason we didn't at the time is we were moving all over the country, still being in the military. We didn't want to deal with the hassle maybe of owning an investment property. Retrospect is, of course, 2020 when you're looking in hindsight. But that's, I think, a good little story there of, hey, we could have built up a decent amount of equity. We would have been paying off that. Yeah. The rent commensurately would be going up, that we would be able to charge people too, because rent's not just based off of your mortgage payment, right?
Correct. So it depends on what you're looking on that end. So if you mortgage is $1,500, most people just care, will the rent cover that? And 99% of the time, right, when you're buying it and you're going to rent it out, it will cover it. Especially if if you live there a couple of years, your mortgage payment is going to be lower than what the current days rates are going at. So therefore, you could look at it as a cash flow then. Hey, my mortgage payment is $1,500. It costs me, or the renter pays me $2,000. Now I'm pocketing, $6,000 a year, right? The amount. So you have that advantage with it. Or some people see it as, I can take that extra $500 that I'm getting in there. I can invest it somewhere else. I can put it back into the mortgage. So my overall long-term play is going to bring down that principal. If you bring down that principal, the interest you're paying over the life of the loan is going to change. I just refied a client that from his primary house, you switch it to an investment. He's going to keep his payment the same. He's going to keep paying what he was already paying. He was like $2,500 a month. We made his payment like $2,000. He's going to keep paying $2,500 a month, and over the 30 years of the new loan, he's going to pay it down in 19 years by doing that, and going to save himself, I think it was a little over $150K of interest.
Yeah, that's
Just
a
over the
great
life of the
point.
loan that somebody else is actually paying and putting that equity into his house.
So I think a lot of times it's about long-term thinking, right? Kind of having
Correct.
a plan, having a
Yes.
goal you're going to, quantifying that, and then being able to have a course charted to get to that goal through a plan that you've built.
And when we're talking about investment properties and long-term goals, even on the short end, if you are buying as your first home, you build up that equity, and it might not be your dream home. Usually your first home is never your dream home. So you buy this home, you have it, you're building the equity into it, you sell it, and now you take all that equity and use it as a down payment on something else. So even at times, your mortgage payment can stay the same because the new house you're buying, if it's bigger, costs more, but you're putting more down, so your loan amount could still be the same as your first time home,
Right.
depending on how you played the game with it or what you bought with it, kind of thing. So that is a hindsight of you're building your own nest egg to buy your next house, and then you use that to buy the next house. You can keep building it up, and even if you do keep it as a rental, once it has enough equity into it, you can pull equity out of it to use it as down payment other places. So let's say your equity is about 30% in there from what is the value, so you pull out 10% of it, and you can use that as another down payment somewhere else too.
Yeah.
So you don't have to always just sell it to get rid of it, to take all that equity out. You could refinance, take out part of the equity, and use it as a down payment on the next home.
There's a lot of options that you could have.
Correct.
Of course, it's kind of a complex thing to
Yes.
navigate, so it helps to
It always
sometimes
depends
have
on your
someone to
goal.
help you out with that, right?
Yes, it all depends on your goals. Because I have clients who are like, oh, I want to look at the cash flow, and then they want to look at the savings at the end, and you can look at both and kind of decide, but usually one or the other is your biggest deciding factor. How
Right.
much cash flow do you want to come from the investment, or how much do you want to, when you sell it, pull down that principal so you're building more into there. So it
Great
just
point.
depends.
Yeah. So yeah, it seems like there's a lot of advantages to homeownership, but at the end of the day, I think it really matters on what your values are.
Correct.
Do you want to be paying for somebody else's mortgage, or do you want to maintain flexibility?
And
at
a
the
lot
end
of
the
times
day?
why people rent is they don't believe they can buy. They
Right.
don't have enough money to put down. They don't think their credit is good enough. And when they come to me, 99% of the time people say I can't buy. The people that think they can't buy can actually buy. Or they can buy within 3 to 6 months, just depending on their plan. So there are programs out there to help you buy a home. Either we help you establish your credit a better way of looking at that, or do we look at down payment assistance to put on there to help you have money to buy the home. So those are advantages to being a first-time home buyer coming in. And a couple of them aren't just first-time home buyers. You could own a home before and still use the other programs that are out there.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, that's one of the biggest goals that I have usually get from my younger clients is they're like, hey, shortest term goal we might have is, hey, we recently got married. We'd like to buy our first house. How do we do that?
Yes.
And that's usually one of the biggest things when we're building a financial plan and a wealth strategy for my younger clients is trying to figure out how to get you from A to B. Like, what's it look like? Also figuring out what the destination looks like what can you afford? Because as you know, that's extremely complex and especially nowadays, constantly changing.
Correct, yes. So what you can afford, everything goes off of the debt to income ratio is what we're looking at on there. And depending on what program we're using, that number can fluctuate very significantly, the difference of 12% on there. So there is a big gap in there. A lot of things are built for kind of first-time home buyers, have a bigger gap to establish yourself. Everybody understands that. Having lower down payment if need be, so you can get in your home. Like we said before, it's the American dream. So
Right.
it's designed to have everybody to have the American dream and get in there, and then build your equity to move yourself along and up the chain.
Yeah. It seems like there's a lot of programs out there that are designed to help, especially first-time home buyers, get in that first house, to help
Yes.
them achieve that American dream, because it's so woven into the fiber of the American culture and like the American psyche is that homeownership.
It is, and I talk to people all the time that when they're so happy they never could afford a home or believe they couldn't,
Mhm.
and it's just it's either they're right there or it's just a little tweaking, and then they're there. And they're like, oh my gosh, like I never thought I could do this. Like this is amazing, and it's just a simple talking to somebody about it and establishing, like yourself, what's the plan? What's your short-term goal? Getting it there. We look at it the same way. Is this might not be your forever home? Let's get you in there, get established, wait a couple of years, move that money out, put it somewhere else, and keep building.
So yeah, that's a good point. I think some of the other disadvantages of renting, though, that real unpredictability.
You do. You have unpredictability because usually you are in a 1-year lease. So after that year lease, that landlord can say, hey, I don't need you here anymore. I'm going to sell it, whatever the case. I want to put somebody else in there. Or, hey, you want to stay? I'm jacking up your rent this much.
Right.
The increase of a rent, you just don't know what it's coming on. Owning a home, your principal and interest, you have a 30-year fixed. It's fixed for a reason. It's fixed. That principal and interest is never changing.
Right.
So it'll stay, that payment will stay the same all the way throughout the thing. Yes, taxes, insurance can slowly increase as the years go along.
I think the variables are less when you own.
The variables are much less. You're not seeing a huge change. I've seen where I personally have rented where it's 5-10% the next year. Hey, you want to stay here? The market demands 5 or 10% more this year around. Do you want it? If you don't want it, leave because we'll get somebody else in there.
Right, because the landlord's also factoring in fair market value, right?
Correct.
If the value of your home goes up and you own it, that's more equity in your pocket, but like you said, it doesn't change your principal or your interest.
And your landlord could be looking at it as a cash flow side of things.
Right.
So
And
they're wanting to increase their cash flow, so therefore they're going to raise the rent at the next lease point, and they give you an ultimatum: pay higher to stay or leave and find somewhere else.
yeah, and I think one thing to bring up too is like the supply, right? Because especially nowadays, still the supply of housing is low relative to the demand, which is going to jack up part of the fair market values of the homes, which also in turn jacks up the rental prices.
Yes,
you're going to have to pay.
They are very tied together. Even though the housing market, there is a shortage in homes right now, there's a shortage in rentals too. So people think, oh, I'll just go rent. They're having the same problem where they are having to overpay really on the rent right now just to get into somewhere, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that really does hurt people, especially if they're in a tight situation where every dollar counts right now, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it brings up an issue that's pretty prevalent here in Palm Beach County, but also nationally, is like workforce housing.
Yes.
Because just regular, every average day people are having more and more difficulty getting quality housing.
Correct.
And part of it's just because of the increase in demand without the supply keeping up. It just jacks up your rent. Long story short, though, that doesn't hit you nearly as bad when you're owning a house. In fact, it can be good for you. Yeah, your taxes might go up.
Your taxes will go up.
Your equity goes up too in the home.
As we're talking, we're in Florida, so if you own the home, you have a home and you live there and it's your primary residence, you're going to have a homestead exemption.
Right.
So your taxes are only allowed to increase a certain percentage each year at max. When it isn't your primary, so if it's an investment property, it can keep fluctuating. If you're renting, that's an investment property. So on that homeowner, if the taxes jump, it's going to trickle down to the renter. That's why you do see the increases every year of the rental rate. So it can, like I said, I've seen it 5, 10, 15% year on year is a huge thing when you're paying what you thought you were paying. If you're living paycheck to paycheck and suddenly it changes,
right?
That's a huge downfall for renting.
Yeah, those are good points. I think the other thing that I hear a lot too, and I do it is technically correct, the disadvantage of owning is it's an illiquid asset, meaning that you can't easily sell it like the next day or relatively quickly, because it's not like a stock or a bond that you own.
Correct.
Where there's a liquid market where you could buy and sell it.
You're
so you hear that as a kind of a disadvantage. You might have $200,000, $300,000 worth of equity in your home, but it's hard to get to usually. But what do you think about that sort of?
It can be hard to get to because that's when we sit down and talk to clients. Is when the refining is what are they looking at using the money for? What's the point of refining? I like to kind of get the background of it because a lot of times when you're refining and you need to pull, let's just say you want to refi just to pull the money out because of an emergency for whatever reason, you might not qualify to pull it out. So sometimes the disadvantage is when people are putting, and this is usually a disadvantage of overpaying on your mortgage to pay your principal down. So you're paying your principal down. You know, your payment's $2,500 a month. You pay $28 just to keep it down. Could that $300 go somewhere else that could still give you the same kind of profits that you're looking for, but be more liquid? The case is yes. It's a personal preference on what you want to do. If it's in your equity, and say you lose your job, whatever the case is, and you needed money to pull out, if you lost your job, you can't pull the money out of your house because there's no way of paying it back. So therefore, we can't refi you to pull the money out. You just have to stay with your current mortgage. But if it was in the stocks or elsewhere, you can pull it out.
Yeah.
So that is a disadvantage that it's not liquid.
Yeah. So yeah, I think at the end of the day, there's definitely some advantages and disadvantages for home ownership, but there's also advantages and disadvantages for renting.
And it all comes on your risk tolerance. You know, what are you looking at doing? You know,
what are your goals? What are your values? What are you trying
correct?
to do?
What is your plan in the next 2 or 3 years? Because if you're owning a home, you're usually going to be staying there for that long. You know, are you planning on moving somewhere else? By somewhere else, I mean further away where that home would not make sense from you. So that's one of the things that you have to look at. Decide, hey, do I rent? Do I buy? What is my best case scenario kind of thing?
Yeah. No, it's a good point. You just gotta, and if you don't know where to start, you know, reach out to somebody who does this for a living. You know, I'm personally a financial planner, and Steven's a mortgage loan originator, and so we're typically subject matter experts on this. So if you have any questions or comments or anything going forward, you know, feel free to leave them in the comments below. And say, Steven, man, good conversation, man. Thanks for discussing this.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's fun. So we'll see you all next time. Stay safe out there, stay sane, and take care.